You will need 700 grams of this yarn Drops Alaska. The recommended needle is 5 mm, a 5 mm knitting needle, scissors, 4 buttons, and a needle. We start casting on 144 stitches, or a number of stitches to have 95 centimeters. We cast on 144 stitches. Once we have all the stitches, remember that here I am making a little sample. We have to work the seed stitch in all the stitches. We start with knit 1 and purl 1. Knit 1 and purl 1. Remember, the seed stitch is knit 1 and purl 1, repeating to the end of the row. We have to make 13 rows with the seed stitch. We take the edge stitch and where we find a knit stitch, we have to purl. And when we find a purl, we have to knit. This is how we have to make the seed stitch. Purl on the knit and knit on the purl. Repeat to the end of the row to have 13 rows with the seed stitch. Once we have 6 centimeters, or the 13 rows, we have to work following the next instructions during 60 centimeters. We have to make an edge of seed stitch of 9 stitches. We have to make 9 stitches of seed stitch to make an edge. And then on the stitches in the middle to 9 stitches before the end, we have to work the stockinette stitch. Stockinette stitch in the middle to have only 9 stitches on the left needle. Remember, the stockinette stitch, we have to start with a knit stitch in all the stitches, and on the following row we have to work the purl stitch. So knit to 9 stitches before the end. And once we have 9 stitches, remember here I am making a little sample, we have to make the edge of the other side, working 9 stitches with the seed stitch. And now we are going to work the row in the wrong side with the edge of 9 stitches with the seed stitch, work the purl stitch to 9 stitches before the end, and work on the last 9 stitches the seed stitch, making the last part of the edge. Remember, we have to work 2 edges of 9 stitches with the seed stitch and stockinette stitch in the middle to have 60 centimeters, plus the 6 centimeters of the bottom edge, we have 66 centimeters. Once we have the 66 centimeters, we have a piece like that. The bottom and the sides edge of seed stitch. And now we have to take 2 stitch markers and leave 50 stitches in one side of the marker and 50 stitches on the other side of the marker and 44 stitches between the 2 markers. Now we have to work the 9 stitches with seat stitch making the edge and work the stockinette stitch to the first marker. Now, from the marker to the next marker, we have to work the seat stitch. We are making now the back part of the neck with the seat stitch. And once we arrive at the next marker, we have to work the stockinette stitch and the edge of seat stitch. We have to repeat the 50 and the 50. We have to repeat the 50 stitches on each side of the stitch markers and the 44 stitches with the seat stitch during 4 rows. Here I only have 2 rows because I am making a little sample. And now we have to work the edge stitch, the stockinette stitch. Now in the part of the neck we have to bind off some stitches to make the hole to place the head. We have to work now 10 stitches with the seat stitch. We work 10 stitches with the seat stitch, and once we have the 10 stitches we have to bind off now 24 stitches. We have to bind off 24 stitches. Make the first stitch, make the second stitch, and pass the first stitch over the second stitch. This is the way to bind off the stitches. Continue binding off 24 stitches. And once we have 10 stitches before the stitch marker, we have to continue working the seat stitch. And after the stitch marker, continue with the stockinette stitch and the edge with seat stitch. Now, during 16 rows or 7 centimeters, we are going to work only in one part of the vest. We have to work the seat stitch edge, the stockinette stitch, and the other edge also with seat stitch. And we have to repeat the same 16 rows. Once we finish the 16 rows, we have to work now the same on the other side of the vest. We have to place the yarn on the part of the neck and continue working the same that we made on the previous part. Now in this part we have to work the seat stitch edge, the stockinette stitch in the middle, and the seat stitch edge at the end of the row. Repeat the same during 16 rows. Once we have the two parts, we have to continue now working both sides together and cast on the stitches that we had to bind off on the previous rows. So work the seat stitch edge, the stockinette stitch, and the seat stitch edge. And now we have to cast on 24 stitches, the same number of stitches that we had to bind off. We have to cast on 24 stitches. and continue working the seat stitch edge, the stockinette stitch and the seat stitch edge to the end. On the following 9 rows we have to work the seat stitch edge, the stockinette stitch to the stockinette stitch to the part of the neck, work the seat stitch on the part of the neck, continue with the stockinette stitch to the last edge with the seat stitch. Here you can see the hole for the head. We finished now the rows with seat stitch on the part of the neck. This is now the front part of the vest. Now we have to continue working with the seat stitch only at the edges. We don't have to continue working the seat stitch on the neck part, and working the stockinette stitch in the middle to have the same size of the back part, working the stockinette stitch and making also 13 rows with the seat stitch. I made 2 buttonholes on each side, and now I'm going to show you how to make it. You have to stop 7 stitches before the end, work the 2 following stitches together, yarn over again, and work the 2 following stitches together. So we have 2 decreases and 2 increases with the yarn over, and continue working the seat stitch to the end. And on the following row we have to work the seat stitch in all the stitches. I made 1 buttonhole at 25 centimeters before the end and 15 centimeters before the end. And once we finished the last edge of seat stitch, we have to bind off all the stitches. Remember how to bind off the stitches. Make the first stitch, make the second stitch, and pass the first stitch over the second stitch, and repeat the same to the end of the row. And this is the shape of the vest. Remember, this is a little sample. Here you have the buttonholes, and you only have to sew 4 buttons on the back part of the vest.